Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling large language models.
Ooh, fun.
The AI behind so much of what we see online these days,
Yeah.
You've probably interacted with them. They power chatbots and write articles, even create art.
Oh, absolutely.
It's,
It's pretty wild.
yeah, it's incredible how integrated LLMs are becoming these days. It feels like they're everywhere.
Everywhere. And so today we're going deep on a research paper
Okay.
called Distillation Quantification for Large Language Models.
Catchy.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Sounds a little complex, but we're here to make sense of it all.
Right.
Have you ever wondered, if those different AI chatbots that are out there
Yeah.
are really that different, or if some might just be sneaky copies of each other?
Oh, interesting.
This paper explores that.
I love it. It's
Yeah.
a question I think a lot of people have, how much is genuine AI innovation and how much is just building off of what's already out there?
Right, exactly. And so this deep dive is all about unpacking model distillation.
Basically, the idea is that smaller AI models might be trained on the output of bigger, more powerful ones.
Nope.
Think of it like a student learning from a teacher.
Hmm.
The student can learn a lot quickly, but do they truly develop their own style and understanding?
Right.
Or are they just parroting, what they've been taught?
That's a great analogy. Yeah, that's the heart of it, really.
Exactly.
Understanding how much of a smaller LLM's knowledge is truly independent versus just a reflection of that larger model that they're learning from.
Oh, wow.
The researchers even have a name for this. They call it the late mover advantage,
Okay.
where smaller models, they get to benefit from learning quickly from their predecessors, but it might come at the cost of originality.
Oh, that's so fascinating. Like they get a head start, but it might limit their ability to explore new paths or come up with unique ideas.
Yeah.
But how do you even measure something like that?
Right.
It's not like there's a plagiarism detector for AI.
You would think, right. Well, you'd be surprised. The researchers came up with some really clever ways to actually quantify the level of distillation.
Oh, okay.
They use two main approaches.
Right.
Response similarity evaluation, or RSE,
Okay.
and identity consistency evaluation, ICE.
Catchy names.
Yeah, I know, right?
So RSE.
RSE is pretty straightforward.
Okay.
It's like comparing essays from two students.
Uh-huh.
You look for similarities in their writing style, their arguments, the specific facts that they're using, and try to determine if they came up with those ideas independently.
Okay, that makes sense. So RSE is all about analyzing how similar the outputs of different LLMs are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But ICE.
Now, IC is where it gets really interesting.
Ooh.
It's like a detective game.
Okay.
Researchers use techniques called jailbreaking to try and trick the AI into revealing hidden information about its training data.
Oh, wow.
Think of it as like looking for subtle clues in the AI's responses, almost like a fingerprint that points back to its teacher.
Ooh, so it's like they're trying to get the AI to spill the beans about where it really learned its stuff.
Exactly, yeah. And they can compare those fingerprints to see if different AIs might have had the same teacher.
That's it.
Pretty ingenious.
Yeah.
But before we jump into the results, I'm curious about the actual models that they looked at.
Yeah.
Which ones were included in this study?
Well, they cast a pretty wide net. They looked at a whole range of well-known LLMs, both open source and those developed by big companies like Google and Anthropic.
Wow.
They included models like GPT, of course, but also Claude Llama Quinn.
Okay.
A pretty diverse group.
Yeah.
And they didn't just look at those models in isolation. They also compared what are called base LLMs, basically fresh out of the training process,
Okay.
to what are called aligned models that have undergone extra training to make them safer and more helpful.
Got it.
It's like comparing a rough draft to a polished final product.
Okay, so we've got a diverse group of students and some different levels of education to consider. This is starting to feel like a real AI classroom.
It is. It is.
And by comparing these different models, the researchers were able to get a much clearer picture of just how prevalent distillation is in the LLM world.
Yeah, and trust me, some of the findings are pretty surprising.
Oh, now you've really got me hooked. Don't leave me hanging. What kind of surprises are we talking about?
Well, let's just say that some of those big-name AI students might be relying on their teachers more than we thought.
Ooh, juicy. Okay. I'm ready to dive into the nitty-gritty of those findings, but before we go there, maybe we should just quickly recap the scoring system they use.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Just so everyone's on the same page when we start throwing numbers around.
Yeah, they use a scoring system to rank the level of similarity that they find on a scale of 1 to 5.
Okay.
So a score of 5 would mean those models are practically identical twins.
Right.
While a score of 1 suggests a truly independent thinker.
Got it. a simple but effective way to compare those AI fingerprints.
Exactly.
Now, spill the tea. What were some of the biggest revelations from this research?
Well, as we mentioned, they found that, many well-known LLMs showed signs of high levels of distillation, but there were a few notable exceptions
Okay.
that really bucked the trend.
Yeah.
Claude Dubao and Gemini consistently showed much lower levels of distillation,
Interesting.
suggesting they might have had more independent development processes.
Wait a minute. That's really interesting, especially because Claude and Gemini are from some pretty big players in the AI field.
Right.
Are they doing something different in their development process?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
The paper doesn't go into deep specifics,
Yeah.
but this finding definitely raises some eyebrows.
Right.
It could be differences in their training data, the
Mhm.
specific techniques used to develop them, or even a deliberate focus on fostering originality.
It's like they were determined to write their own essays,
Yeah.
even if it meant, extra work and research.
Exactly.
I'm curious to see what other surprises they uncovered, but I have a feeling we're just scratching the surface here.
Yeah, you're right about we still need to unpack those findings about base versus aligned models. And there's that intriguing detail about the Quinn-Max model that I think will really pique your interest.
Okay, now you're just teasing me.
I know.
Sounds like we got a lot more to cover in this deep dive. Stay tuned, listeners, because we're about to uncover even more fascinating insights into the world of AI and the question of its originality.
Yes.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of LLMs and, this intriguing world of model distillation. We've been uncovering some surprising findings about which AIs might be more original than others, but it's not just about, individual models, is it?
Right. You're absolutely right. The researchers went beyond just looking at those individual fingerprints
Yeah.
to see if there are any broader patterns.
Okay.
They wanted to understand how distillation might affect an LLM's performance on, different tasks.
That makes sense. After all, AI isn't just about writing, creative text. These models are being used for all sorts of things, like solving math problems, following complex instructions, even reasoning through logical puzzles.
Exactly. And to explore those different aspects, they used several data sets,
Okay.
Arena Hard Numina and ShareGPT.
Ooh, those are fun names.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Each data set is like a different testing ground for the AIs, a way to assess their skills in various areas.
So it's kind of like an AI decathlon.
I love that.
Each model gets put through its paces to see how it stacks up against the competition. Did any patterns emerge when they looked at those results across the different data sets?
Definitely some of the models that consistently scored lower on distillation, like Claude Dubao and Llama,
Okay.
also performed well across all those different tasks.
Hmm.
It supports the idea that they might be, more independent thinkers,
Right.
capable of applying their knowledge in a variety of contexts.
So it's not just about being a one-trick pony.
Exactly.
These models seem to have a more adaptable intelligence, a sign of potentially more original development. But what about the models that showed higher levels of distillation? Did those patterns hold true for them as well?
Yeah, they did models like the Quinn series and DeepSeek, which consistently showed higher distillation scores tended to perform less consistently across those different data sets.
Interesting.
It suggests that, their knowledge might be more specialized,
Mhm.
making them really good at certain tasks, but maybe less adaptable when faced with something new.
So it's almost like those models are specialists.
Yeah.
Really good at what they've been trained on, but maybe less flexible when thrown a curveball.
Right.
It makes you think about those trade-offs in AI development. Do you prioritize specialization or generalization?
Such a fascinating question, and it's one that researchers are grappling with as AI becomes more complex and sophisticated.
Yeah.
How do you create models that are both highly capable and flexible enough to adapt to new situations?
It's the age-old debate, jack of all trades versus master of one. But with AI, the stakes are much higher.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about career paths here, but about the very nature of intelligence and how it might shape our future.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that brings us to another really crucial point raised by this research, the question of human evaluation.
Oh.
Up to this point, we've been talking about these, AI fingerprints and sophisticated scoring systems, but how do actual humans perceive the outputs of these different models? Does distillation have any noticeable effect on how we experience their responses?
That's such an important question. After all, we're the ones interacting with these AIs, relying on them for information, entertainment, even assistance with complex tasks. If distillation is leaving a fingerprint on their outputs, we need to know if we can even detect it.
You're thinking like a true researcher.
Oh, stop.
And to answer that question, The team behind this paper did something really clever. They compared the scores generated by their automated methods RSE and ICE
Okay.
to evaluations made by human judges,
Oh, wow.
and the results were pretty striking.
Okay. Now, I'm really curious. Did those human judges pick up on the same patterns that the algorithms did? Were they able to spot the signs of distillation without knowing all the technical details?
Yes, to a surprising degree, they focused specifically on those models that had shown the highest levels of distillation: DeepSeek, GLM4 plus 5.4, and QuantMax.
Okay.
And when they compared the human evaluations to the scores from the RSE and ICE analysis, there was a strong correlation.
Wow. So even without knowing all the intricacies of jailbreaking and fingerprints, those human judges could sense that something was different about those distilled models.
Yeah,
They could tell that those AIs weren't quite as original as some of the others. That's both fascinating and a little bit unnerving, isn't it?
it is. It really is. It suggests that, distillation might be leaving a more perceptible mark on an AI's output than we initially thought.
Hmm.
And that raises all sorts of questions about how we evaluate and trust AI systems going forward.
Right. If we can't always rely on the AI itself to tell us where its knowledge is coming from, we might
Yeah.
need to develop new approaches to human evaluation, ways to train people to recognize those subtle signs of distillation.
I think that's a crucial insight. It's like we need to develop a new kind of literacy, a way to read between the lines of AI-generated text
Mm,
and assess its originality.
right.
We need to be able to distinguish between, genuine insight and clever imitation.
That's a powerful way to put it. It's like developing a sixth sense for AI transparency, learning to look beyond the surface and really evaluate the independence of the information it provides. This is definitely making me think about AI in a whole new light, but I have a feeling we're not done with those surprises yet, are we? What else did this research uncover?
Well, there's one more set of results that I think will really blow your mind. Remember those RSE scores?
Yeah.
The ones that measured similarity in response style logic and content?
Right, right.
Well, they compiled all those scores across the 3 data sets, Arena Hardumina and Shared GPT, to see if any trends jumped out.
Okay.
And trust me, the results are quite revealing.
Okay. You've definitely piqued my curiosity. Spill the beans. What did they find?
Well, first, as we might expect, models in the GPT series, especially GPT-4o0533, scored very high on similarity.
Okay.
They seem to be drawing heavily from a shared knowledge base, which makes sense given their close lineage.
So the GPT family is sticking together, at least in terms of their knowledge sources, makes sense. But what about the other models? Did any of those results stand out?
Absolutely. Remember how Llama and Dubao consistently showed lower levels of distillation? Well, they also had significantly lower RSE scores, particularly on the Arena Hard and Numina datasets.
So once again, those models are proving to be the mavericks of the bunch.
It seems that way.
Their outputs are more distinctive, even when compared across those challenging tasks. But hold on, I'm looking at the data here and something else is catching my eye. The Quinn models, specifically QuenMax 0919, seem to be scoring pretty high on similarity, right up there with the GPTs.
That's a keen observation, and it lends further support to the idea that, QuenMax, while certainly a capable model,
Yeah.
might be leaning heavily on distillation. It seems that its knowledge base might be more derivative than some of those other standout performers.
This research is really making me rethink everything I thought I knew about AI. It's like we're peeling back the layers of this complex system, and each new discovery is more intriguing than the last, but I have a feeling we're just getting started. There's so much more to explore here, so much to consider about the implications of distillation and the future of AI.
You're right. We've only just begun to scratch the surface. And in the final part of this deep dive, we'll zoom out even further. We'll explore the broader context of this research, looking at how it connects to related work on knowledge distillation, data contamination, and even the ethical implications of these probing techniques. It's going to be a fascinating journey, so buckle up.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the world of LLMs and model distillation. We've been on quite a journey.
We have.
Analyzed AI fingerprints,
Right.
explored the concept of an AI decathlon,
Yeah.
even touched on the ethics of probing the minds of these digital
It's
creations.
been a wild ride.
I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a mix of awe and apprehension as we wrap up this exploration.
Me too. Me too. It's like we've opened up this Pandora's box of, fascinating and slightly unnerving possibilities with AI.
But like you said earlier, it's all about context.
Exactly. This research isn't just a fascinating glimpse into the inner workings of AI. It connects to a much larger conversation that's happening right now about the responsible development and use of these systems.
That makes sense. It feels like AI is advancing so rapidly, and we're all trying to keep up, figure out what it means for, our lives, our work, our future. So how does this paper fit into that bigger picture? Where do we even begin to unpack those connections?
Well, the paper itself actually does a great job of pointing us in the right direction.
Okay.
It delves into some related work that provides really valuable context for these findings.
Okay.
One of the key areas they discuss is the broader field of, knowledge distillation in general.
Right.
Remember, this technique has been around for a while,
Yeah.
used to compress larger models into smaller ones for all sorts of applications.
Right. It's like creating those super efficient AI assistants that can run on our phones without draining the battery in like 5 minutes.
Exactly, practical stuff.
Yeah.
But as the paper highlights, applying distillation to these massive language models introduces a whole new set of considerations.
Okay.
It's not just about efficiency anymore,
Right.
but about potentially shaping the very knowledge base of these systems that are becoming more and more influential in our lives.
So it's less about making them fit in our pockets and more about making sure they don't inherit all the limitations of their predecessors. Like we want them to learn from the best, but also forge their own paths, right?
That's a great way to put it. And this leads directly to another crucial concept discussed in the paper, data contamination.
Oh, yeah.
They draw a parallel to research on how training data can become polluted with test data,
Uh-huh.
leading to skewed results and an inflated sense of an AI's capabilities.
Ah, yes. It's like accidentally giving the student the answer key before the exam, not exactly a fair assessment of their true knowledge.
It's exactly. But while data contamination usually involves, a specific data set, LLM distillation is much more subtle and pervasive.
Okay.
It can happen through various channels, making it harder to detect and control.
So it's like trying to trace the source of a rumor that's spread through the entire school. Good luck finding patient zero.
A perfect analogy, and this is why the paper's focus on quantifying distillation is so important. It's about developing those tools and techniques to bring this hidden process to light, allowing for more transparency and accountability in AI development.
Transparency and accountability, those are words we hear a lot these days, but especially when talking about AI, it feels like everyone's trying to figure out how to ensure that these powerful technologies are developed and used responsibly.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And that brings us to the final piece of related work discussed in the paper, the somewhat controversial topic of jailbreaking.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about it earlier in the context of the ICE method, but it's worth diving a bit deeper into the ethical considerations surrounding this technique.
Jailbreaking, it does sound a bit rebellious, doesn't it? Like hacking into the AI's brain to make it do things it wasn't supposed to do.
In a way, yes, jailbreaking techniques are used to bypass those safety filters and ethical guidelines that are built into many LLMs.
Right.
Researchers in this paper used it as a tool to probe those models' knowledge bases, but it's a technique that can be used for less noble purposes as well.
Like making the AI generate harmful content or spread misinformation.
Exactly, and that's why the ethics of jailbreaking are so complex. On one hand, it can help expose vulnerabilities in AI systems, leading to improvements in their safety and security, but on the other hand, it can be exploited for malicious purposes.
It's like that old saying, knowledge is power, but it can be used for good or evil. I guess the same applies to our understanding of AI.
Well said, and that's why this paper's emphasis on transparency and independent development in the AI field is so crucial. The more we understand how these models are created and trained, the better equipped we'll be to mitigate those risks and really maximize the positive potential of this technology.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. We've explored those subtle influences on AI development, debated the trade-offs between specialization and generalization, even touched on the ethics of, probing the minds of these digital creations. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling ready to step away from the computer for a bit.
Me too. A little digital detox is probably a good idea after all this.
So for our listeners who've been on this journey with us, what's the key takeaway? What should they be thinking about as they encounter AI in their daily lives?
I think the most important message is this: don't take AI outputs at face value. Question their sources, consider their potential biases, and remember that even the most sophisticated models might be influenced by this subtle process of distillation.
It's like developing a healthy skepticism, not just for the news we read or the products we buy, but for the information we receive from these increasingly influential AI systems.
Exactly. And if this deep dive has piqued your interest, I encourage everyone to check out the full research paper. The link is in the show notes. There's so much more to explore, so many fascinating details we couldn't cover in our conversation today.
Absolutely. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. What surprised you? What questions are still swirling in your mind? Join the conversation on our social media channels, and let's continue this exploration together. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep exploring this incredible world of knowledge.